folks went to bed. We told them we were over this side. So we're gonna try back again.
Yes, so we're gonna take the mic, just talk into it, we're recording, so we wanna make sure we
Talk
get
into
the
it.
sound. Yeah.
Have the other moderators been kind of working the room or moving about?
They worked about side of the table and had conversed. This last time was, this room was more of a presentation style, so do what you want to do.
Okay.
I think doing, which is walk and talk, is that what
You know how I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
That works this way. There's one umbrella and two sandboxes.
We're going to get started when you go. Do you want to run the slide clicker or do you want me to?
I don't know if I know how.
Well, I can sure do it for you. I'll do it for
a
you.
mic at the table as well, so that if you're asking questions and we need to answer, just make sure we're answering into the microphone so
Yes,
that we
ma'am.
can get it for the recording. And then I'll turn it on and off on there.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Ooh, loud mic.
We're supposed to talk to the podium.
We're going to get started with this discussion on the guard base and volunteer stories, the involvement in the flood efforts. My name is Leah Braun. I'm the city culture strategist for the city of Rapid City. I'm in the mayor's office, and I'm delighted to facilitate this panel. I happen to know Duke. I worked with him when I was in the National Guard, so it's a real honor to see his presentation, and John as well. Looking forward to hearing his comments. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then they'll each have about 10 minutes to share their story, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. So 30 minutes total, and then we'll switch with the room next door, and you will get a chance to hear that presentation, and they'll come over here and hear this one. So I'd like to introduce John Moyes. John has served as the 28th Bomb Wing Historian at Ellsworth Air Force Base since January 2015. His prior service in the Air Force includes time as an ammo troop with service in Operations Desert Storm and Shield to provide comfort and Northern Watch. He'll have to tell us more about his time in the Air Force. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to John, and after his 10 minutes, we'll switch and hear from Duke.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. I've been at Ellsworth 7 years, and I regrettably didn't know very much about the flood until about 2 or 3 years into my time here, because it just wasn't something I knew about. I am familiar, having grown up on the Mississippi River, with the devastation and tragedy that can attend a flood to the communities and to the people around. It's a tragic event, and there's no real way to put positive spins on any of it, except looking forward from the flood and the things that have happened. On base that night, Colonel Barnett got the word and ramped up the emergency command post, and Ellsworth swung into action. Ellsworth provided a number of services and abilities and things to the community as the flood was waning down and in the subsequent days. There were people all over base, the base personnel and people, the dependents, who swung into action. They offered up their homes. They let people, I think there were 200 people from the community area that were allowed to stay on base. They opened up community centers, they opened up the chow halls. The base was there to help. The Trans Squadron at the time, Transportation Squadron and Services Squadron, ramped up and moved vehicles out. There were a number of vehicles, buses, wreckers, cranes, earth movers, trucks, all kinds of things were marshaled and sent into the community. The other thing that happened was the base started, they took a canvass of the people to make sure everybody was okay, and then the base started sending people out to help. That was another thing that went on. Base personnel went out all over for rescue and recovery operations. They supplied the drivers to the vehicles, and base services, the hospital, for instance, provided, and I want to read this to you from first account documentation from the after action reports, so I don't misspeak. $300 vehicles, 12 helicopters, because at the time we had the missile wing here, and there were helicopters associated with the missile wing and the missile yards out away from here. So the helicopters swung into action and were providing rescue and relief efforts. The base, as I told you, was a focal point for relief. So a lot of aircraft came in, and we had people coming in to oversee what was going on and be involved in what was going on, and these included the governor, senators, Mrs. Nixon, the president's wife at the time. The base was the place for all that to happen. The hospital, field house, various docks, services had laundry facilities, and they did laundry for local hospitals and extended care facilities, nursing homes and such. The hospital gave out 100,000 doses of typhoid vaccine. People were allowed into the hospital there. They saw 242 outpatients, 4,600 inoculations. 16 physicians and dentists donated their man hours and time to this. 18,000 gallons of jet fuel was provided for various reasons, for various things that went on. Various pumps, water pumps and whatnot, were donated to pump water out and to secure facilities. 280 lunch boxes prepared and sent to Box Elder and Rapid City. 24, almost 25,000 pieces of clothing laundered at the hospitals, or laundered for the hospitals and the nursing homes. 190 disaster victims accommodated on base. Now, I've seen various figures on that, but we could call it 200-ish. The base also provided meals, 4,400 pounds of chicken and 1,400 pounds of beef that were donated by the local community and also by Ellsworth, prepared on base for meals for those affected by the flood. The base, from what I've read, and I had to dig in on this because I really didn't know that much about it, and I had to dig in and really see what the base did. And the base did, I think, what any base would do with a local community. They rallied to help. And in that vein, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, the base lost some people. There were some dependents that were lost and a couple service members that were lost, but there were 6 in particular that were lost in operations to save people. And I want to mention their names: Captain Richard Mundell, Staff Sergeant Marvin Pepper, Tech Sergeant Blake Thornton, Staff Sergeant Otis Matthews, Sergeant Billy Noble, and Staff Sergeant William Rowell. All of these men were lost saving people. They weren't the only ones, of course. I know that there were emergency personnel and probably community members that were lost trying to save people, trying to help people. But the base dove into action and worked very hard to support the community. with everything that went on, and that was the mounds of paperwork I went through, what I got, again, was Ellsworth tried to help. And these gentlemen, these service members, these airmen, for instance, rescuing victims, rescue efforts, rescue operations. Service members will run to the fight, and these people did. There are a number of accounts about what people that walked back to the base, so to speak, and said, hey, your airmen did this. They did these things. And there was a tourist here, he was a doctor, and they were just visiting. And one of the comments he made back in a letter to the wing commander at the time was, I saw some people and they came, they tried to help us, and we found out that they were from the Air Force Base. And this doctor, this tourist, and his family found out about this, were seeing all this go on, and were saved by members of the Ellsworth community. It was kind of heart-wrenching for me to go through this stuff, because as I said, in the interest of complete transparency, I didn't know much about it. I hadn't been here that long, so I didn't know. But to go back and read this stuff and see what the Ellsworth community did for Box Elder and for Rapid City was pretty humbling to me, and made me, again, proud to be an Air Force veteran and to be the historian at Ellsworth Air Force Base. I can't do justice to this event. I can't do justice to the people that were lost, to what the community went through. I can't do justice to the first responders who swung into action, and I can't do justice to our base, but I can speak to it. And it made me proud. And the base was involved. The base cared. And the mounds of documentation, you would see that. I threw some numbers at you, but that doesn't count. That doesn't give you a good accounting of all the man hours and all the people that were out there. The squadrons sent people, gathered people up and said, you guys go here. A bunch of people reported to the mayor. The mayor said, you're mine now. They said, okay, what do you want us to do? Again, our airmen ran to the fight. And I hope, if I'm not doing justice to this, you can smack me, but don't smack the base, because the base did respond, and the base cared. The base still cares about the community. And there were people from Ellsworth that gave the ultimate sacrifice. Two of them are memorialized with the on base with the building, the non-destructive inspection building. And I had a picture, that's when it first really hit me. I had a picture of the survivors, these two men, wife and families. And they were standing in front of the building. Thornton and Pepper were the ones. And that's when it smacked me that, wow, the Ellsworth, we really did something. I hope that I have given you a glimpse into this, and if you have questions, please, hopefully I can answer them. If I can, I'll be honest and tell you I can't, but see me afterwards. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, John. Next, we get to hear from Duke Doering. Since 2012, Duke has been the historian for the South Dakota National Guard in Rapid City. Doering retired from a full-time National Guard career on November 8th, 1999, as a Command Chief Warrant Officer. He was appointed as South Dakota's first state Command Chief Warrant Officer in 1999. He began his military service as a Private E1 on September 15, 1955, when he enlisted in the South Dakota Army National Guard with the 109th Engineer Battalion in Sturgis. After years in numerous enlisted positions, he received his appointment as Warrant Officer in July 1978. Help me welcome Duke.
On Saturday, the 3rd of June, 1972, that was the first day of the 2-week annual training period for most of the units of the South Dakota National Guard. About 70% of the South Dakota National Guard, which amounted to about 2,000 troops, were within a 50-mile radius of Rapid City. The 147th Field Artillery had 1,030 people out to the Badlands Artillery Range. The engineers had 237 people at a bivouac site near Robay Lake. And on Camp Rapid itself, there were about 600. So we're talking about the 2,000 troops. Those on Rapid City were mostly administrative, security people, aviators, but total there was about 3,000. The first week went smoothly. We started on the 3rd of September, so the first week ended on Friday afternoon. And Friday afternoon late, and people were then, in those days, given a pass for the weekend. Leave Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock and come back in on Sunday night. And so they had done that, and most of the people were gone. Of course, they always kept 10% back of all the units, but most of them had just left. About then, after they left, about then it started raining. And at about 6:45, the records show to me that at 6:45 there was a highway patrolman from Sturgis by the name of Clyde McHugh that was going up Boulder Canyon, and the Bear Butte Creek in Boulder Canyon was overflowing onto the road. That's on Highway 14A between Sturgis and Deadwood. So Clyde McHugh called Dick McGrath, who was the county sheriff of Lawrence County. He was also the civil defense director of Lawrence County. Dick McGrath was not a timid man. He did not hesitate ever when he got in trouble or had a problem to call the National Guard. This was no different. Clyde McHugh calls him. Dick McGrath, the sheriff of Deadwood, calls direct to the General Corning. He says, I got problems, I got the road washing out, I've got people in Boulder Canyon. I need 6 deuce-and-a-half trucks, cargo trucks with drivers. So General Corning says, we'll get that taken care of. And he hangs up and he calls his chief of staff, Stretch Leemaster. And Stretch Leemaster, he tells Stretch, he says, I think we're going to have a problem if it keeps raining. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to call a staff meeting and have all the commanders come in so we can kind of ready them in case we do have a problem. Well, the rain continued. Well, Leemaster starts the meeting. He gets the commanders in, and he gets about halfway through, and all chaos breaks loose. And the chaos breaks loose, and the EOC, which was in, go ahead, Lisa, and get a little bit, to get to the EO, there, right there. And that's in the basement of the old headquarters building that was on Camp Rapid at the time. And the EOC, Emergency Operating Center, was with state radio. So there was great communications between the Guard and the state and the sheriff and everything. So this is the crew that they snapped a picture of that were operating early on in the night of June 9th. So Stretch Leemaster didn't get his staff meeting over, and people were pulling into the camp and requesting all kinds of things, and so more guardsmen were going to be needed, and they could see that, so it was before cell phones, and so they got on TV and radio, had the TV stations and had the radio stations, call all National Guard back to Camp Rapid. There they would assign them, in most cases it worked like this. They would have the trucks were big, they were huge, and they were pretty good for this problem we were having, the water. So they were a lot better than a car or something. You know, they were high wheels and good. So they would assign 3 people, 3 soldiers with a length of rope and a flashlight, and send them out and to different areas of Rapid City. Well, the crews then would get beat up with the police or the firemen, and they would block roads because they had to block a lot of roads because people would drive into the water. They just didn't quite understand what they had going on. So they had to block roads and do that. And then they got into the business real deep where they retrieved stranded people. People in trees, people in buildings, people in cars. It was dangerous and it was exhausting work. And the lives they saved were in the hundreds. The rescue teams brought the refugees back to Camp Rapid or to the armory or to the churches. There they were given cots and blankets and food. It was impossible to deliver the bodies to the mortuaries because the bridges were out. It was a long night. Then the general sent out a call to all South Dakota Guard units, not just those scheduled for annual training, but those scheduled for annual training in August. And they were told to report to Rapid City as soon as possible. So overnight on the 9th, about 3 in the morning, they were calling these people from Woonsocket, Chamberlain, Huron to Vermilion, and they would use the alert list, and they told their people to report to the Army immediately, be prepared to stay for a week, and so the people all came. The people come in. 948 people came from those other towns that weren't scheduled to be in until August. So on the 10th of June, the Guard's primary duty was search and rescue and body recovery. Also on this date would, let me get this picture in. This is a typical picture of what was happening and this was on the road between Sturgis and between Sturgis and Rapid City early in the morning. A young soldier by the name of David Super happened to take this picture, and that's just how things look. That's how tough it was on that Box Elder Bridge. Another one, if you would. Okay, we're talking about the search and rescue, and this was a couple of days after, and they were still finding bodies and pulling them out. This is a young man from Flandreau, South Dakota, with his gloves, that black gloves on. That's that's going through the rubble. They're trying to move things, and they're still looking for bodies. This guy's looking to scoop the mud out of a car. That's Storybook Island, the old Storybook Island before, after the 9th of June. Now, that wrecker came from Huron, and that was the one that came out the next day after the flood. That got called specialists come out. So they had wreckers like this, and they were real handy for all the problems we had. The Troop Medical Clinic. There was a doctor by the name of Robert Hayes. He was the state surgeon, and he was also the director of the health at Pierre, South Dakota. He wanted 40,000 shots of typhoid and tetanus, and for all the people in the community, not just all the soldiers. And he got them the next day. They came in the next day. Amazing. This was a water purification system that got in there. It came from Wagner, South Dakota overnight, and it was in there within 24 hours purifying water and distributing water. This is getting ready to clean out a bridge, because there's a couple things they're going to do after this. They built 3 bridges across Rapid Creek in the next 2 or 3 days. And that bridge there came from Chamberlain, and they also put another one in 2 days later up by Chapel Valley. And one more. That's a Bailey Bridge. That wasn't taken, this picture wasn't taken in Rapid City, but that's the type of bridge called a Bailey. And we put that one across Rapid Creek also. And going up to Sturgis now, and of all things, with all the 238 deaths, Sturgis was one of the first ones to be notified about the water, but nobody died in Sturgis from the flood. Now this dam is called Fort Meade Dam. It's 2.5 miles outside of Sturgis. A lot of people that lived in Sturgis had never even knew it was there. But the Corps of Engineers flew over that dam, and they were in control of the dam. And they flew over it and determined that it was excess and it was dangerous. So they called on the Guard to breach this dam. It was 54 feet high, by the way. That's it. Yeah, and so on the 21st of June, the 109th Engineers at Sturgis breached that dam, and it took care of that problem. It was one thing I want to tell you here is that the president had sent out a consular, one of his advisors, to Rapid City. His name was Robert Finch, and when he was interviewed, he said it was an act of God that the Guard was on duty at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Duke. Very great, interesting stories. We appreciate it very much. So we have just a few minutes left before we switch with the room next door. And there are 2 gentlemen here who have firsthand knowledge of the flood. Len Kemetz, are you in the red there? Len, maybe you want to come up and say a word. And Mike Sorensen in the back of the room. Mike? So if either or both of you want to come up and say a word, you certainly can. We just have a few minutes left. I think this discussion could have gone much longer, but anyway, come on up if you like.
Thank you for hearing me. It was a rough night for everybody concerned. I was a member of the South Dakota National Guard with the 1742nd out of Watertown Transportation Unit. Our unit was first called out to evacuate a nursing home, which we never got to because we were we were loaded up in a 5-ton diesel. Got down to Bacon Park, and the water was coming across the bridge so fierce that it was taking the 5-ton off the bridge. So we backed the 5-ton up, and we could hear all these people screaming in the trees. So we worked our way around the backside of the water, and like I said, we had some ropes, and we tied the ropes together, and we had a flat-bottom boat that we floated out into the water, and we held the boat underneath the trees and allowed the people in the trees to drop down. We saved quite a few people, but we lost a few too. That's the part that you never forget. The ones that got away. But we're thankful. We saved a number of people, brought them back out of the water. I do remember at one point walking out or trying to get the boat back out of the water, and we had 5 or 6 of us standing alongside the boat, trying to walk it through that heavy rain and heavy water and all the noise. And I looked back, and my buddy was gone, and of course, I knew he was right there someplace, so I dove down and happened to find him. And he was, of course, caught in a branch or a hole or something, and I just jerked him out and pulled him out with us, and luckily he survived as well. So we then continued on the rest of the night, doing the same thing over and over. So, excuse me. It's still hard to think about. But it was a long night, so I appreciate you guys putting up with me and hearing me here out. So, oh, awesome.
Hi, I'm Mike Sorensen. I lived in Rapid City at the time. I was in the 235th. I lived in very close to, where the Dairy Queen is, just 2 blocks down from there. The flood missed us, but we were going camping that night. I'd gotten one of those passes that everybody wanted to get. I got one. We were going to go camping up at McGee's Siding right on the river below Victoria Lake. Well, we never got there. It got a little deep. After the water started breaking over the front of the pickup, I knew we probably ought to go back home. We did, and I got called for the guard. It got called out, and I was one of the first ones there, except I didn't have my full uniform on, so I had to go back home and get my uniform. And the first truck that left, 2 of the people died in that truck. They were up near the old dog track. They were killed there. We got back, and what I thought I'd do is, after the incident, after the flood, they asked everybody to do reports on, what you were doing, and this is one of the ones that I had. I think I didn't get any sleep for like 3 days. They finally pulled me out of the truck, and I slept for a day and a half. But this is what happened. They said, okay, where were you on Friday night? Well, I was on my way to McGee's Siding. I was going camping. When and how did you first hear about the emergency caused by the flood? And I said, after our experiences with water higher up in the hills, I reported to the camp and was told we had an emergency. And what did you do in the first alert? I went back home, got out of my hip boots, got my uniform on, and returned to the unit, and described your involvement in the rescue activity during the Friday night flood. We tried to rescue a heart patient, but the water was too high. We went to New York Street, found water very high and people in trees, top of houses, many screaming for help. Finally got a rope across the current, and we got 9 people across. We were forced to leave as 3 of us were soaked, and we couldn't work any further. There were Sergeant Olson, Kraus, and Spigigny were with me. We finally got the rope across. One of us swam across the rope, and I have a whole thing. Anyhow, maybe I should just keep on. I had a 2.5 truck, all rope, 700 yards, lights to the truck, and we stole the boat. It worked really good. What kind of equipment did you employ? Well, that's what we did. Was it effective? Yes, but it was really, really hazardous. What equipment not available to you would have been useful? A rope gun, large rubber raft, and life preservers. Considering the situation, what would you have done to make methods or your efforts more effective? More units in our area. No one knew what was happening in our area. Our assignment was to pick up an old lady who was scared and take her to the auditorium. We got there and found 10 feet of water. We couldn't even get there. Okay, write a short narrative. Well, so this is what I did. You know, after 50 years and gray hair, I can't quite remember what I wore yesterday, so it's kind of nice to go back over these things to remember what I did. After one dry run, accomplishing nothing, we drew an assignment to pick up an old lady at the New York Street, 520 New York, and take her to the auditorium. The only problem was that by then we found the way to East Rapid. The water was far beyond New York Street, and we could not reach 520. But hit 4th Street and New York, and there people were just crying for help. The creek was up about almost to Denver Street. We got out, saw the situation, and proceeded to try to put a line across the road. And we finally got a rope across New York Street. The water was only waist deep, but it was so fast on the street you couldn't even stand up. We almost lost our Specialist Force Savigny, who was really the one who braved the most danger in putting the line across the rope. And I was paying out line with him on the end of the rope, standing in waist-deep water when I was hit by some debris. I think it was a water heater, and knocked me to the bottom of the water, and I took a mouthful of somebody's lawn, and then about a block later, I was able to get out of the water and come back up. Finally, we got all the line across, got a boat on one side, and while we were there, we took 9 people to safety. It was 4:30 Saturday morning, and both Savigny and I were so cold and shaking, we could no longer hardly function. And so Sergeant Olson drove us back to the camp to get dry clothes. I got dry clothes, food, and washed the mud out, and started making runs to Bennett Clarkson with water. That's another big story, but it wasn't until 2 days later that I found out our one rope and the boat got at least 100 people out, including James Standing Bear, a man in our unit. He was the one who told me about all the people between Omaha and New York that were picked up by rowboat, brought to our rope, and ferried across the river. It gave me a great sense of satisfaction. Finally, on Sunday morning, I could no longer drive, talk, or walk, and I fell asleep at 9:30. Nobody bothered me, and I woke up that night and went to bed. So, all of the things that Duke was talking about, there were a lot of things happening out there, and it was so chaotic. Nobody knew exactly what was happening. You couldn't see everything. It was dark. It was a very, very long and tiring experience. Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists again, and thank you to Len and Mike. I wish we had more time. Really appreciate you being here this morning, and you're welcome to go to the panel next door. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.